Last summer, I left my comfy house in North Carolina for a summer experience in India. I was slightly nervous to be going alone, but even more so, I was excited to be back in India and for the adventures I was going to have. So after a long flight trip, I landed in Hyderabad, one of the largest cities in India and generally considered the meeting point of North and South India. So a unique blend of cultures, religions, and food can be seen, and it is evident in the architecture and local languages of Telugu and Urdu. But the first thing I noticed when I landed was the heat. Although it was not as humid as it is in North Carolina, it was definitely intense and dry. My work was mostly in Banjara Hills, a quite well-to-do enclave in Hyderabad. While it was nice to be surrounded by shopping malls and parks, it made for a traffic nightmare. I soon mastered the art of zigzagging through the cars on the road. The goal of my summer was to develop 2 Android applications for the non-profit arm of care hospitals, and my project mainly focused on the 2 village clusters in Andhra Pradesh. The first application I worked on attempted to simplify the record-taking process for the health workers at the village. Most of the workers had just been recording the patient data on books and then sending the carbon copies to a central location. I wanted to expedite this process and simplify it by doing it all on a smartphone. This meant that I had to understand how the records were being taken at the villages. So I spent the first week traveling to different villages and observing the day-to-day process. It was quite interesting to be at the clinic and seeing how the health workers interacted with the patients and what exactly they were writing down. This was important because it helped me figure out what I should set out to do in the mobile application. In addition to this, I worked on the second application, which was for a microinsurance program that the hospital was going to launch. Its main aim was to help subsidize normal health visits as well as expensive medical procedures for the villagers. The app was needed to enroll the villagers into the program, and I approached this application in a similar manner. But it entailed more meetings with people at the insurance companies and some of the higher-ups at care hospitals. After getting the basic understanding of the applications, I worked on making them a reality, which meant a lot of coding and testing at the central office. Mr. Girish, the director at the center, really helped with the logistics and made sure I received the help I needed. Every 3-4 days, I'd go to the villages and test my applications to make sure that what I was making was going to be a product that these health workers would actually use. Furthermore, I spent a good amount of the time during the internship meeting with doctors who worked on the telemedicine aspect of the operation. One of the doctors was a gynecologist who had weekly Skype sessions with the female villagers. I was able to take note of these sessions and get a better grasp of what the medical problems female villagers were facing. This was a great learning experience for me, as it taught me how a doctor needed to explain complicated and complex procedures to the villagers in a very understandable manner. I was also able to shadow the gynecologist. While I have no interest whatsoever to become a gynecologist, I learned a lot about women's health that I had no idea about before. In addition to the work, I truly grew as a person this summer. It was my first time staying in India alone, and I became more independent, but the biggest takeaway for me was patience. Whether it was for a meeting or a bus to get on, I had to force myself to be calm and patient, because meetings and buses often did not come on time. Hyderabad is a confluence of many religions and ethnicities of India, and it was definitely evident from the mosques, the temples, and the food there. So there was no shortage of things for me to see, and I spent a lot of time visiting monuments, such as the Charminar, or the Buddha statue in the middle of the lake in Hyderabad, with many of the other interns. There was such an eclectic mix of food, and I tried the biryani that Hyderabad is so famous for many times. More interestingly, I found myself at McDonald's more times than I had ever been to in the US, mostly because they had vegetarian options, and their Indianized burgers were just awesome. One of the most enjoyable times for me was spending time with my cousins and family. We shared so many stories, and not only visited places in Hyderabad, but other places in Andhra Pradesh as well. I'll always remember these shared memories. At the end of the summer, I became a much better programmer and more knowledgeable about rural healthcare and how smartphones could really push healthcare into rural villages that had never seen it before. It was a humbling and enriching experience, and I found myself not wanting to leave at the airport as I said goodbyes to my family. This transformative summer will always be dear to me, and I would like to thank Mr. Burch wholeheartedly for this experience.